There's a building in Manhattan, 42 stories, finished in 2019. The lobby has marble floors, the elevators work, the plumbing is connected, every unit is move-in ready. Nobody lives there. 3/4 of the units have never had a single tenant. At night, the building is a black rectangle against the skyline. Dark windows stacked on dark windows, floor after floor. 6 blocks away, someone is sleeping in a doorway. This isn't a glitch. It isn't an oversight some developer forgot to fix. It's the system working exactly as designed. Today we're going to break down why empty buildings stay empty, even when the demand is screaming, even when people have the money, even when every rational instinct says, fill it. Because once you understand this, you'll stop thinking the housing crisis is about a shortage of homes. It was never about that. As of the most recent Census Bureau housing data, the United States has roughly 15 million vacant housing units. Not abandoned, not condemned, vacant, sitting there, habitable, empty. Meanwhile, over 500,000 Americans experience homelessness on any given night, and tens of millions more are what economists call cost-burdened, spending more than a third of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. Put those two numbers next to each other and the math stops making sense. If the solution to a housing crisis is simply build more, then someone needs to explain why the buildings we already built are sitting empty. The uncomfortable answer is that supply was never really the bottleneck. Something else is. Put yourself in a developer's shoes for a second. You build a tower. Land, permits, labor, financing. Let's say it costs you $80 million to build. Now you have two options. Option 1, rent every unit out fast at a price working families can afford. Cash flow starts immediately, but your margins are thin. Option 2, hold. Let the units sit. Let the neighborhood mature. Let prices climb. Then sell the whole building, or unit by unit, to buyers who see it as an investment, not a home. Here's the part that doesn't get said out loud enough. In real estate, staying empty can be more profitable than being occupied, because a property's value isn't driven by whether someone's living in it. It's driven by location, scarcity, and where the market expects prices to go next. So an empty unit isn't dead weight to the owner. It's an appreciating asset that requires no maintenance, no tenant disputes, no wear and tear, and no rent control exposure. That's the first mechanism nobody explains to you in school. Now zoom out, because this isn't just a developer story. A huge share of units in cities like New York, Miami, and San Francisco were never bought to be lived in. They were bought as a store of value. Think about it from the buyer's side. If you're sitting on a few $1,000,000, whether you're a hedge fund, a foreign national, or a domestic investor, where do you park it? A savings account barely beats inflation. The stock market is volatile. Real estate feels different. It's tangible. It's a hard asset. It can back a loan. And in cities like New York or Vancouver, foreign capital has poured into condos specifically because owning U.S. or Canadian real estate is seen as a safe, stable place to sit out economic uncertainty back home. So people aren't buying homes, they're parking money, and parked money doesn't get used. The unit sits locked year after year because renting it out means dealing with tenants, turnover, maintenance, and risk. If the whole point was just to hold value, renting introduces hassle for almost no upside. Here's the irony almost nobody talks about. The people who can afford these units don't need to live in them. The people who need to live in them can't afford to buy in. And in between, the building just sits there, waiting on a transaction that has nothing to do with shelter. Let's actually run the numbers, because this is where it gets clear. Say you buy a $1 million condo in a hot market appreciating 6% a year. Sit on it empty, and you've made $60,000 this year. No tenants, no property management, no risk. Now, compare that to renting it out. Average rental yields in most major U.S. cities run somewhere between 3% and 5% annually. That's $30,000 to $50,000 a year, before you subtract property management fees, vacancy gaps, repairs, and the very real risk of a bad tenant or an eviction process that can take months. For a purely rational investor, the decision is almost automatic. Appreciation gives you more money, with zero hassle. Renting gives you less money, with real hassle. So keeping the unit empty isn't irrational. It's actually the financially optimal move. And that's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath the entire housing crisis. Housing was never built purely to shelter people. In its current form, it functions as a mechanism to store wealth. And when a system's primary function becomes wealth storage, its secondary function, housing actual human beings, quietly gets deprioritized. Now let's look at the gap between what we're told and what's actually happening. Every new development gets marketed the same way. Luxury living for everyone, affordable housing initiative. Every mayoral campaign promises to solve the housing crisis with more construction. And to be fair, building more does help at the margins. Supply matters. But here's the catch. New units enter the exact same system. If holding a property empty remains more profitable than renting or selling it affordably, then new construction just becomes more inventory for the same investment behavior. It's like pouring water into a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. The water level rises a little. The hole is still there. Some cities have actually tried to plug that hole. Vancouver introduced an empty homes tax in 2017, an extra annual tax specifically on units left vacant. Within a few years, reported vacancies dropped noticeably. Singapore layers additional stamp duty onto buyers who already own multiple properties, specifically to discourage speculative hoarding. Even New York has floated a pied-à-terre tax targeting ultra-high-value units that sit empty most of the year, though it's stalled repeatedly in the state legislature.
Where these policies get implemented, vacancy tends to fall, because suddenly, sitting empty stops being free. But in most of the US, these policies don't exist, or they're watered down before they pass. Because real estate isn't just an industry, it's one of the largest sources of political campaign funding in the country. And when the people writing housing policy are financially entangled with the people profiting from vacancy, meaningful regulation has a way of quietly dying in committee. Pull back even further, and this stops being a story about buildings. When housing becomes an asset class instead of a necessity, its price stops being determined by what people need. It gets determined by how much capital is looking for somewhere safe to sit. And global capital, spooked by inflation, currency instability, or a shaky stock market, consistently flows into real estate, whether or not that real estate has anything to do with actual local demand. That's why, in city after city, home prices have detached from local wages, not gradually, sharply. In some U.S. metros, home prices have outpaced income growth by a factor of 3 or 4 over the last 2 decades. When price disconnects from income long enough, you get a permanent class of renters, people who will work their entire lives and never own the place they live in, inside a market where owners have no financial incentive to treat them fairly, because the owner's real profit was never coming from the rent check. And there's a longer-term risk buried in here too. When enormous amounts of capital get locked into an asset that produces nothing, no goods, no services, no jobs, just stored value sitting behind a locked door, it's capital that isn't funding businesses, isn't funding innovation, isn't circulating through the economy at all. This was never just a housing problem. It's a capital allocation problem. And capital allocation problems, left alone long enough, calcify into generational inequality. So next time you walk past a dark tower, the one with no lights on, floor after floor after floor, remember this: that building isn't failing. It's doing exactly what it was built to do. The real question was never how do we build more homes. The real question is, once a system makes staying empty more profitable than being lived in, is building more units ever actually going to fix it? Or do we need to finally decide what a home actually is? A place where people live, or just a number that keeps climbing in someone's account, whether or not the lights ever come on?